Is marriage the goal? Should marriage be the goal in 2024 for women? Better yet, is marriage even beneficial in this day and age? We're going to talk all about marriage and women and, of course, femininity. Stay tuned. Welcome to the Secret Formula of Femininity for women who want to live a more feminine, fun, and fabulous life. I'm Dr. Nicole Montero, your host on this weekly journey to unlocking your inner radiance, nurturing fulfilling relationships, and becoming the best version of yourself. Welcome back. I'm Dr. Nicole, your guide on this journey to embrace your true feminine essence. And this is a topic that is both timeless and timely. There is no way we can really talk about femininity, your feminine energy, relationships, if we don't talk about the big elephant in the room, which is this debate about, is marriage the goal? Should it be the goal? And you hear it on both the men's side and the women's side. Men are saying, I don't want to get married. Women are saying, it's not beneficial to me. So we're going to talk and dig a little bit deeper because I know you may have heard some discussions. There's a lot of emotion involved, people bringing up negative things either that have happened to them or people that they know, and people trying to cite statistics, which I think a lot of times are taken out of context, but they're using those statistics to kind of support their position as to why marriage is not beneficial either for men or for women or even for both. Okay. So let's do a little story time. And I work with lots of women. I'll just do this composite. I like to kind of bring together a lot of different stories and give it a name. So let's just call this person Amy. And we're going to say that Amy is a Gen X woman, an Xennial, as they say, a later millennial. And most of the women in that era, including myself, grew up seeing a lot of strong women. And this is where a lot of the music was touting independence. I think there wasn't even a song like INDEP, right? And it was talking about wanting an independent woman. It was the age in hip hop when you had a lot of women coming out and staking, their claim to be a part of the hip hop culture. So you had female rappers and they had to show that they could go, toe to toe with the male rappers. And so this was just an age, I'm just like setting the stage to let you know that women's empowerment, female empowerment was something that was not only in the music and in the popular culture, but that a lot of people saw around them. A lot of the Gen Xers, millennials, like these are the first or very recent latchkey kids, children of divorce. Not to say that divorce didn't happen before, but this is an age where people were like, you know what? I can do it on my own, especially from a women's perspective. I don't necessarily need a man, right? And then that has just sort of trickled over the last 40 years, and it's almost like a mantra, and it has come to a debate where I hear it all the time. The Amy's come to me, right? If that's my fictional character, the Amy's will come to me and say, I don't need a man. I want a man. I desire a man, but I absolutely do not need one. I'm educated. I'm accomplished. I am upwardly mobile. They used to have this term called a BUPPY, a Black Upwardly Mobile Professional. I am making six figures or more, or whatever the case may be. I have my own house, I have my own car, right? I can do all of those things without a man. So I don't need a man, right? So that's the first thing you hear. And then it's like, well, I don't need marriage. What benefit will marriage bring to me? So I hear the Amy's talk about this and debate about this. But then I also hear the Amy's say, I want that traditional family structure. Either the Amy will say, like, I didn't have it, or I saw other people having it as they grew up. I know I was close friends. My parents were split up, but I spent weekends at my dad's house, the weekday with my mom, and I would be with my dad and my grandmom during the on the weekends. But I grew up with a very close friend who I spent a lot of time at her house, and her parents were together, and I loved just being a part of their traditional family structure. They were entrepreneurs, they owned a business, and I would spend the night and we would all sit down and eat dinner together, right? Whereas for me, I would eat dinner with my dad and my grandmom, and even my mom would come over on Sundays at my grandmom's house, but it was still going between two different homes. So I'll talk to some of the Amy's who experienced that, and they're like, you know what? Even though I can do it all in terms of finances and education and navigating the world, I desire this family, this more traditional structure, either because I had it or because I didn't have it. And I yearned for it. And so it's hard to just ignore an internal burning desire that you may have just because on paper it looks like as a woman you don't need a man. Okay. And so it then creates this internal struggle where it's like, on the one hand, you might even, if you're an Amy, you may even have the voice of some of the older aunties or women in your life and your family that you witnessed. And they're like, girl, no, you don't need him. You can do bad all by yourself, right? So there's an internal battle because sometimes Amy will have this desire. They want to be in marriage with a man, but they also feel like they've seen people do it alone, and they are avoiding the commitment they are afraid might hurt them. And we've got to be honest, right? There's a large swath of women who've been through some heartbreak. They've been through, just like all of the ups and downs. The Xennials and the Gen Xers, they went through the crack epidemic. They went through mass incarceration of the males in their community. So a lot of them did have to do it alone. So if you're an Amy, you might have heard some of the older women or seen them, and they are distrustful. They are avoiding being committed and then potentially being hurt. And so I saw this video that was so deep where it was an interview. I want to say it was from the 70s, and it was on one of those shows, 60 Minutes or something. And there was this white anchor or reporter interviewing a group of like maybe 7 or 8 teenage, mid to late teenage girls. They all had kids, so they were teenage mothers. And of course, all of them were single mothers. They were young, they weren't married. And he was asking, is anyone here married? Of course, they said no, they're all young. Does anybody here want to get married? Nobody. I think one person raised their hand. Do you need a man? And all of them, it was like a focus group discussion. And all of them were like, no, I just need the baby. Or I don't want to have to take care of a man. It's hard enough taking care of a baby. Like if I get into this committed relationship, that's just an extra burden. All of my energy is for the baby. Right. So there were these interesting comments. And you could see that was the root of, in the Black community, this gap where it's like you can have the baby, but you don't need the marriage. And that's not to say that that's everybody, but just think about the Amy's who grew up around that, or who saw that, or who experienced the remnants of that, where having a baby is considered less of a big deal than marriage. And I was listening to this interview with a marriage sociologist, and he was saying that for a lot of people, because they didn't experience growing up in a household of marriage, they hold marriage on a pedestal, like this idealized thing that feels and seems out of reach for them. And so when you idealize something, you almost make it like it's this precious thing that you can't attain. And so he talked about how a lot of people had such high, not just standards, but high uh, unrealistic regard or expectations for marriage and a marriage partner that it almost seemed out of reach. And that having a baby was sort of easy. You know, we all know what you got to do to have a baby. It's not that hard. And so, in a lot of ways, marriage was considered such a big deal that it felt like I got to really get this right. But we all know when you're trying to do something perfectly, you tend to not do it. And so in this interview, he was like, basically, a lot of people feel like they will never be able to reach marriage, either financially or in terms of the pool that they have access to. And so they keep it or they hold it as this ideal, but they never actually practically pursue it or think that it's for them. So I was like, oh my gosh, that is really, really deep. And a lot of that applies to people, women on the lower socioeconomic spectrum, but even on the higher spectrum, right? A more middle or upper middle class, if you have such a large group of women who grew up as daughters of divorce, or they didn't see a lot of marriages around them, then they are going to feel like they can do it on their own because actually they are doing it on their own. So there are all these layers of why someone like an Amy might have the desire for marriage, but in her actual life, she may A, think it's not possible, B, feel fearful that she can't attain it, that it won't happen, C, avoidant of actually committing out of fear of getting hurt and things not working out because she didn't see it work out. And what we do know is that we tend to feel we can do things that were modeled for us. This is why role models are so important. So, if the commitment that it takes to be married and to stay married, if we didn't see that, then we don't really have a vision of that happening, or we don't see the steps, like the inner workings of how that actually happens. We don't see family meetings. We don't see people going through ups and downs or calling on the community to support them or learning to communicate or understanding that conflict doesn't mean that the relationship or the marriage is over. Like, if we don't see those practical everyday things that are part of marriage, then we won't know how to actually be married. I already said you probably know where I'm going to come down on this debate of should marriage be the goal, or is marriage still beneficial for women in 2024? I think yes. And I think a lot of the rhetoric that we hear is coming from a place of fear, coming from a place of fear that I won't get it or I don't know how to do it, that it's not going to work out. And so then we just bash it and we bring out all of these marginal statistics that may not even apply to us, but we use that to show that, you know what, marriage isn't beneficial to us anyway. So women these days get presented with a myriad of choices, options. We got options, as they say. And one thing I do know is that sometimes too many options can make you paralyzed. There's this book called The Tyranny of Choice. I think that's the name of it. But like when you have so many things to choose from, you actually end up not feeling so satisfied with whichever one you choose. And so we have so many options in general as men and women. We could choose to shack up. We could choose to be casual and be in situationships. We could choose to be with someone and delay marriage. We could choose to get married. We could choose to not be in relationship with anyone. So we have so many choices. But historically, if we look at marriage, it has been the cornerstone of society, many different societies. It doesn't mean everyone was always married. You've always had women who weren't married, men who weren't married, right? But it has always served as the cornerstone of society. A lot of marriages, especially if you look in the upper echelons of societies, any society, it's arranged. because it's an alliance, it's a political thing. And then in a lot of cultures and a lot of families, they want to make sure that the families can come together. It's not just an individual thing. So marriage has been a cornerstone of society, but it has also felt for women at times oppressive. Especially in the West, it's like you're someone's property. There's a different take from an Islamic perspective because a lot of scholars will talk about how Islam gave women rights 1400 years ago, the same rights that a lot of feminists were fighting for in the 1900s. So, there's different experiences with marriage, but what you start to hear is that in a modern sense, a lot of women are like, was marriage ever really beneficial to us? And now that we have so much choice, so many options, it begs the question, is it beneficial to us now? So let's break down what the benefits are, even still, even up to today. So we know historically marriage served so many purposes. It brought families together, it was political alliances, but marriage, just from an everyday person's perspective, has really been a means of building wealth, building family, and more increasingly, personal growth. So we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just because we look at some history books and we look at the history of marriage and how it may not have benefited women depending on their status, we cannot deny that there are so many benefits for women currently, for women and men. Now, there's research, various strands of research that people are quoting to say that marriage is more beneficial to men. They talk about research that shows that married men have better health outcomes than single men. And presumably, it's the role that the woman, that their wife takes on to make sure that they go to their appointments, that they are that their well being is taken care of. Women, we are taking care of our men as we should be. If you're in a marriage, you should be helping to take care of your partner. They also talk about research that is supposed to be citing that the happiest group is single women, unmarried women without children. So the aunties, right? The aunties of the community, that they are the happiest. I would beg to differ because, first of all, what is the time period that they're measuring this happiness? What is the happiness, right? You might have a happy mood, but is there longing for connection or family? There's so many dimensions to measure besides just a self report of happiness at a point in time. Because let me tell you, when you are married as a woman and you're raising kids, it is stressful. Absolutely, right? But that doesn't mean your long term happiness is not going to benefit from that experience, right? For some women, it doesn't. We have to be honest. But if you're asking a woman who has, for example, two kids under two, in the moment, how happy are you? It depends. It depends on who's crying and what's going on that day. So I think you have to look at it much more like what we call longitudinally over a period of time. And so if you're just comparing, you're saying a single woman without kids is happier. I want to see what time periods they're comparing for that. The other thing is there's different dimensions of it, right? So there can be fulfillment even if your mood isn't happy. It is deeply fulfilling to pour into and see grow and raise another human being. Now, does that mean every woman has to be a mother? No, it does not mean that. But let's not push this narrative. Women with kids, married women, are unhappy, they're miserable, they're not living their best life because there is a level of fulfillment that needs to be measured, not just uh, mood being happy or self report of happiness at a particular time, right? Because when you're raising kids, or if you are in a marriage and you might go through periods where you guys, it's on a down slump. Right? You ask a person how happy they are feeling then. But then if you go and you go a few years and things get better, you guys work on it and you look back, there's a level of fulfillment and happiness about the fact that you all got through that and got to a different place. So it's much more layered, right? If you listen to Michelle Obama, she talks about I don't know, she said there were years. I want to say she said there was a decade when she and Barack just she wasn't feeling it. She was not liking him. So, and she goes into how she had to start having better boundaries, aka things that I'm always telling you all about. My book, The Boundaries to Bliss Blueprint, goes deeper into it. But she had to start taking ownership of her own marriage, her own happiness within her marriage. So those studies are interesting. Also, what is really significant, and I've looked at this research across the board, married women's happiness is really correlated with, it's really connected to the quality of the marriage. So for men, it's not so sensitive. Like married men have better health outcomes, better overall well being than unmarried men. However, for women, when women are in an unhealthy marriage, they aren't doing as well as unmarried women. But women who are in healthy marriages or marriages where they feel they are working on it and there's a deep sense of commitment and their satisfaction from that, they are doing much better. And overall, married people report higher levels of well being in different areas: physical, emotional, financial, and that's a huge one that I want us to talk about. Financial is big. So it's all about, especially for women, the quality of the marriage. So if you are getting married or you are married as a woman, it's about making sure it's about quality. It's not just to get married and put a ring on it, as they say. In this day and age, you need to have a quality marriage, a quality relationship. All right, so let's talk about some more of these pros. Let's break it down. There are numerous economic benefits. Let me say this again, right? For both men and women. Even our tax structure, like everything is set up to benefit the legal union of two people. From a tax perspective, from a property perspective, from even like a healthcare perspective. And so I was looking at this reel where they showed the different uh, ethnic groups and their marriage rates, as well as their wealth as a community. And the higher the marriage rates, the higher the level of wealth within that community. So, economically, marriage offers combined incomes for a lot of people. If both are working, even if they're not, it's combined resources, combined ability to build wealth. So you have one household, even if one person is staying home. If you are that traditional stay at home wife, you are contributing to the household. So it's a resource. There's tax breaks, and for many women, even those who are career women, it offers a lot more economic stability and security. And I know it's hard to really believe that if you're doing it on your own, but when you're combined with someone else, there is more stability, there's more security, there's more opportunity for growth. Now let's talk about emotionally and psychologically. As I said, a lot of research, there's been many studies that shows that married people often report higher levels of life satisfaction and emotional well being in different dimensions over time compared to single counterparts. There is just something as far as security and the opportunity to count on someone, depend on someone who's your romantic partner that brings a level of satisfaction. Now, one thing that a lot of people point out is that it's important to have community outside of your romantic partner. So, not just depending on the person you're married to, marriages where there's only one person that is providing every single financial, emotional, spiritual need that you have, that's a lot of pressure, right? So, marriages benefit from each partner having their own community, not their own community, but like having a sense of connection to something outside of their romantic partner. So that could be community, that could be an interest, a hobby, a career, something that also gives fulfillment. A supportive partner, though, can be a source of comfort, love, companionship that brings a deep level of fulfillment and satisfaction. All right. There are a lot of social benefits. As I said, this not much has changed as far as marriage really being the cornerstone of society. And so individuals do get status, a certain status that is recognized both from their families, from society. Um, it can also offer a sense of belonging within the community, but also a shared sense of purpose with your partner. So there's that psychological or social benefit that you get from being in that relationship. Now, we are not going to lie and say that there are no drawbacks. And one thing I tell women all the time is like there's no certainty in anything. Because I hear a lot of people saying, well, you can be married and still be a single mother because he's not helping out. And it's like, no, it's not the same thing. But also with that, that's a sign of needing to learn better skills, communication, how to let each other know what your needs are, how to get support, right? Let's not throw out the whole institution of marriage because we've seen poor examples of people being able to communicate or poor examples of people being able to commit. So let's not throw it all out because of that. But we do want to talk about what are some of the challenges or what you can see as drawbacks. So, marriage rates, we can't deny, divorce rates have skyrocketed over the past 50 to 70 years. They are looking like they're leveling out, but that is also because the marriage rates are going down and also people are waiting until later to get married. It's almost an anomaly to see somebody like just marry their high school sweetheart, you know? You have people waiting, moving, choosing partners outside of like their parents or their family being involved because they might have moved somewhere to go to school or to take a job or do something else, right? So marriage rates are declining and a lot of people are deciding to just cohabitate, which this is a side note, may not protect you legally because in a lot of states, your property gets treated almost the same as a married couple's property is considered like common law marriage. And so you still have to go through some of the same things if you were to split up as someone would have to go through if they were divorcing. So the age has increased and people are focusing more on their careers and other things that they want to establish. You hear a lot of rhetoric where women will say, I don't want to build with a man. I want a ready made man. Men are saying, I want her to be all together. There isn't necessarily the sense of growing together, getting together young and growing together. It's like everybody's putting focus into making money, their careers, living their life, as they say, living their best life. And then what that does, though, it makes it sometimes harder to want to commit to someone because a lot of things. One, you might feel like you have too many options. You have the option not to marry someone. The other is that you have this established identity and it's hard to want to make compromises with someone else, right? Your demands might be higher. your standards, I don't really want to say standards, I will say your expectations might be higher. Because I think a lot of people think they have high standards. We all have standards for ourselves, right? I mean, if you have self respect. But I think what some people are calling high standards are really idealistic expectations that help them to avoid actually getting into a committed relationship that will lead to marriage, right? But I think the longer you go without having that, without wanting to commit or build with someone, it gets harder to do that, right? Just because you get set in your ways, you have your own identity, you have a sense of like, I don't want to build with someone. The other thing is that, yes, married couples accumulate more wealth over time compared to people who are single. However, it's harder when it feels like you are not where you want to be economically and you feel like, no, I need to get myself together before I get married. And so, not every person sees marriage as a way to build wealth. They see it almost like I'm in a situation where it's a barrier to getting married. I got to get my money up, as they say, to get married. And that ends up like not allowing people to feel like they can get married. Again, they both want these ready made partners, but what that does is that cuts off the opportunity for you to really grow and build with somebody. And there's a lot of fear. You have women saying, look, I'm doing fine economically, financially. I don't want to risk it by putting my trust into someone. I was talking to a colleague once, and she was saying she talks to a lot of women with PhDs and higher education. And as they're getting it, they feel a sense of sadness because they feel like they are educating themselves out of a man, right? They feel like the gap is too high. Like, if you're professional, do you really want to be with a blue collar person? And this is part of what I was saying. When you wait too long to get married, it's harder because you feel like the gap between you and the rest of the pool that's out there is too large, right? You feel like, well, I'm making more, I'm more educated, I'm not going to lower myself. Whereas if you get married younger, I'm just giving you one perspective, right? If you get married younger, you may be able to build together with that person, and it doesn't feel like there's such a wide gap. You might both motivate each other. There are a lot of cultures where a woman can be married and still going to medical school or getting her education. So it's not like it has to be one or the other, but I feel like where we are in 2024, a lot of what you hear about relationships, especially geared towards or being pushed on Black women, is like, no, sis, don't settle. And there's nobody out there for you, right? So you're being inundated with this idea that you have these high standards, but no one can meet them. And that doesn't actually lead to satisfaction. It leads to feeling like, oh my gosh, like you feel really badly about it. The other thing is, as I said, for women, it's the quality of the marriage that matters. And so, yes, it is picking someone that you're compatible with. It is having the skills, namely communication within the relationship, to be able to voice your needs, get your needs met, also understand your partner's needs, like to really work on this together, because it's the quality of the relationship that determines whether or not it's beneficial for women in particular. And if the quality is bad, then yeah, a lot of times when one of the drawbacks is women will feel trapped. They will feel like they don't want to start over again. They will feel like this has completely drained them. They might even feel like it ended up being a self-fulfilling prophecy because they never saw a healthy marriage. They got into a marriage and lo and behold, it became unhealthy or unsustainable as well. Another thing is most people these days do not talk enough about gender roles and gender expectations within their marriage. They don't talk about it. So, as a woman, do you expect a traditional man? Are you looking for traditional masculinity where he's providing, he's protecting? Are you looking for something that feels like equal partnership? As the man, is he looking for a traditional woman that displays traditional femininity and traditional gender roles, people really need to be clear and upfront about what they expect and what they desire. Because if you desire something and you haven't voiced it, and then your partner's giving something else, you guys get married, and he's like, oh, we're doing 50-50, but you were expecting full provision, full protection, and so forth. Or if he was expecting peak femininity. And, you're like, I'm not doing it. I don't know anything about that. I'm a strong, independent woman. It's not going to bode well. So that is one of the things, how people talk about the questions that you want to ask on the way to marriage. A whole set of questions needs to be there about gender roles and gender expectations. And it needs to be everything from what does it mean to contribute to the household? Because sometimes people talk about 50-50. We assume that they mean 50% of the bills are shared, but it could be, we need to talk about what is 50-50. Maybe it's 50% of me giving my feminine energy and 50% is you giving the financial provision, and that equals to 100, right? Or we both giving 100% of our respective strengths, and that's how we're going to grow together. You just need to talk about it. Many more men than speak up about it want a woman who is comfortable in her femininity, that has some aspects of like being domestic or wanting to be in that role of receiving, of being more feminine, of feeling comfortable taking care of home, catering to her man. Like a lot of people, a lot of men want that. They may not say it all the time. They may want to feel like they want to be progressive, but deep down, that's what they want. A lot of women who are also very independent, they have that desire for masculine protection and provision, and to feel like somebody else is leading and making decisions, and making her feel protected and like she doesn't have to do it everything. She doesn't want to be in a marriage where she's making all the decisions, she's planning everything, she's taking care of home, and then she's going out and conquering the work world, not having time for herself, right? But people are not talking about this. And this is a conversation that really needs to happen in 2024 when it comes to marriage. Like, let's be frank, because there's so many different options, right? There's equal partnership, there's 50-50, there's traditional makeup, like he pays 100%, you take care of home. There's so many different ways to do this, but you need to make sure that you're on the right page. And that is one of the things that, even through ups and downs, will guarantee more of your success in marriage. Okay, so how can marriage actually align with your goals as a woman? I mean, I've laid it out, right? As a woman, most of us want to be cared for. We want to be valued. We want to feel valued. We want to feel secure. We want to feel not just cared for, but taken care of. And marriage is the best opportunity to have all of those things come together. It is also a great source of personal growth. See, there is nothing like being forced to work something out and not having the option to just walk away. Because I think we're in an age where commitment has gone down, and it's so easy to walk away that it is so much harder to commit. So, marriage doesn't have to mean that you're sacrificing your personal goals or your personal growth. And actually, marriage is a great platform for personal development. There is nothing like having to stay committed and not just being able to walk away. In an age where commitment to anything seems to be washing away, it is a great source of personal growth, fulfillment, and satisfaction over time to be able to work it out and work on something. Also, marriage can be a place to really Practice boundaries on a deep level because there's always that tension between deep connection with your partner and wanting separateness. We all have both needs. We have the need to connect with someone and be, aligned with them. We also have the desire and the need to have our own identity and our own sense of self. And so in a marriage, you really have to both practice commitment, but also boundaries. And that requires you to communicate. And that'll be a whole different episode. That's another aspect of the emotional and personal growth that you go through. Now, just think about all of the situationships that are happening in this day and age and how it really just promotes avoidance. You can avoid communicating. You can avoid being vulnerable and putting yourself out there. You can avoid really trying to understand what your needs are and letting the other person know because you're just in this situationship or have this understanding that doesn't really require the same level of emotional work that being in a committed relationship does, being married does. Okay. So I do have a couple of questions, right, that people sent in. One is, can a woman be truly independent and still benefit from marriage? So this is what I'll say. I'm curious, right? I would be curious if I saw this person face to face. What is it about independence that is so appealing to you? And would you be open to interdependence? That is where there is a mutual benefit of being connected and dependent on each other. And I'm not talking about codependency, which is unhealthy, where you get your emotional needs met by taking care of somebody else, even to your own detriment. No, that's not what I'm talking about. Interdependence is where you are connected. It's not so easy to just, break apart and call it off or, separate yourself. And you both need each other in order to grow in a healthy way. And so I would be curious as to, or I would want to know, are you open to interdependence and not just independence? Because independence is truly something that you can do by yourself. But interdependence requires another person. So I would say you probably are asking, do you still get to have your own identity and sense of self if you're married? And absolutely, the answer is absolutely. As I said, it is a need and a desire that we have as humans is to have our own sense of self. Now, what that looks like and how that takes shape and form, it depends. It depends on your personality, your cultural background, so many different things. But you should have, as I said earlier, your own identity, your own sense of self. Okay. This is the second question. How can I make sure my marriage doesn't compromise my personal growth? Very interesting. Again, I think these questions point out what the propaganda that's been pushed about marriage, that it is stifling, that it is you can't grow, you can't be your own person. And again, some people have had that experience. But I loved a quote that I saw that was like, not all of our grandparents or great grandparents' marriages were like the color purple. And if you remember the book in the original movie, it was a horrible marriage between Mr. and Celie, right? And so this person was like, don't believe the hype. Not every marriage was like that. So when you say, can I make it work without compromising my personal growth? I think there's an assumption there that you can't do both and. But actually, what marriage is about, especially in this day and age, is both and you're actually helping each other to grow. There's nothing that will hold a mirror to you like being committed to another person. You will learn about yourself. You will understand that your stuff stinks too, right? You're not immune from having flaws, having your own toxic traits, and having your own baggage from your childhood or your past. So, being in that marriage is going to help you to be able to face some of those things and to grow in a way that would be really hard to do individually. It's a whole different level of growth to really be there through thick and thin. And I think part two of this is going to talk about what is the difference between the normal ups and downs of a healthy marriage and toxic struggle love, which, we're not promoting that. And that's part of the problem is that there have just been these generational patterns of toxic relationships that everyone has just gotten fed up or really pessimistic about it. So we want to talk about the difference between that. So absolutely, you'll need to have boundaries with yourself, like understanding your needs. You'll need to learn to be able to communicate. And communication is, again, a two-way street. So it's not barking orders. It's not, just telling it like it is all the time. It's really learning the art of listening and of really tapping into conveying your message so that the other person can truly receive it. And you also want to just make sure you not only get to know your partner as you all go through the different phases of life, but that you get to know yourself at your different stages of life. A healthy marriage should support both of your personal goals. Marriage can be beautiful, it can be an empowering experience. You have to approach it with intention, with respect, with the clear understanding of your needs and of knowing that if you don't have the tools, you need to get the tools. And in my group coaching program, the Boundaries to Bliss Society, we help women to gain the tools of self understanding, of personal accountability, of communication, of boundaries, and of really being able to tap into their feminine energy. And that is always going to be a great thing in a marriage. And your husband will appreciate it. Let me tell you that. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. This is part one of many because there are so many layers to talking about marriage in 2024. But this is just an intro. Don't forget, if you want to learn, especially about healthy boundaries, healthy self love, and approaching relationships with intention, then you want to get my book, The Boundaries to Bliss Blueprint for Women Who Are Finally Ready to Win at Love. Link is in the show notes. And also, if you want to learn more about my community, the Boundaries to Bliss Society, the link is there as well. All right, everybody, I will see you in the next episode. And again, don't forget to embrace your power, nurture your spirit, and let your feminine essence shine. This is Dr. Nicole.